Hello there. Hello, Sissy Lala and Mary and Amy, and I'm sure there are others here now. Welcome to a fireside reading of the final half chapter, the final reading of Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. We've been reading this for a couple of weeks now. It's not very long, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have too. For the rest of this week, I got a request to read The Velveteen Rabbit. So it's a kid's book, and it should take 2 days to read. So I'm going to start that. I'm going to start that on Thursday and finish it on Friday. Then we'll have the weekend, and then I'll start it tomorrow. Thursday, Friday. And then, so it's Tuesday today, so no reading tomorrow. Thursday, Friday, The Velveteen Rabbit, and then I'll tell you then what we're going to start with the following week, a new book in earnest. All right, let's see what happens with the end of Siddhartha. Welcome to a fireside reading of Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, Chapter 12, Part 2. This is the final reading. Siddhartha bent down, picked up a stone from the ground, and weighed it in his hand. "This here," he said, playing with it, "is a stone, and will, after a certain time, perhaps turn into soil, and will turn from soil into a plant, or animal, or human being. In the past I would have said this stone is just a stone, it is worthless, it belongs to the world of the Maya. But because it might be able to become also a human being and a spirit in the cycle of transformations, therefore I also grant it importance. Thus I would perhaps have thought in the past. But today I think this stone is a stone. It is also animal. It is also God. It is also Buddha. I do not venerate and love it because it could turn into this or that, but rather because it is already and always is everything. And it is this very fact that it is a stone, that it appears to me now and today as a stone. This is why I love it, and see worth and purpose in each of its veins and cavities, in the yellow, in the grey, in the hardness, in the sound it makes when I knock at it, in the dryness or wetness of its surface. There are stones which feel like oil or soap, and others like leaves, others like sand, and every one is special and prays the Om in its own way. Each one is Brahman, but simultaneously, and just as much as it is a stone, is oily and juicy. And this is the very fact which I like and regard as wonderful and worthy of worship. But let me speak no more of this. The words are not good for the secret meaning. Everything always becomes a bit different as soon as it is put into words, gets distorted, a bit silly. Yes, and this is also very good, and I like it a lot. I also very much agree with this, that what is one man's treasure and wisdom always sounds like foolishness to another person. Govinda listened silently. "Why have you told me about this stone?" he asked hesitantly after a pause. "I did it without any specific intention. Or perhaps what I meant was that I love this very stone and the river and all these things which we are looking at and from which we can learn. I can love a stone, Govinda, and also a tree or a piece of bark. These are things, and things can be loved. But I cannot love words. Therefore, teachings are no good for me. They have no hardness, no softness, no colors, no edges, no smell, no taste. They have nothing but words. Perhaps it is these which keep you from finding peace. Perhaps it is the many words. Because salvation and virtue as well, samsara and nirvana as well, are mere words, Govinda. There is no thing which would be nirvana. There is just the word nirvana. Quoth Govinda, not just a word, my friend, is nirvana, it is a thought. Siddhartha continued, a thought, it might be so. I must confess to you, my dear, I don't differentiate much between thoughts and words. To be honest, I also have no high opinion of thoughts. I have a better opinion of things. Here, on this ferry boat, for instance, a man has been my predecessor and teacher, a holy man, who has for many years simply believed in the river, nothing else. He had noticed that the river spoke to him. He learned from it. It educated and taught him. The river seemed to be a god to him. For many years he did not know that every wind, every cloud, every bird, every beetle was just as divine, and knows just as much, and can teach just as much as the worshipped river. But when this holy man went into the forests, he knew everything, knew more than you and me, without teachers, without books, only because he had believed in the river. Govinda said, but is that what you call things actually something real, something which has existence? Isn't it just a deception of the Maya, just an image and illusion? Your stone, your tree, your river, are they actually a reality? This too, spoke Siddhartha, I do not care very much about. Let the things be illusions or not. After all, I would then also be an illusion, and thus they are always like me. This is what makes them so dear and worthy of veneration for me. They are like me. Therefore I can love them, and this is now a teaching you will laugh at. Love, O Govinda, seems to me to be the most important thing of all. To thoroughly understand the world, to explain it, to despise it, may be the thing great thinkers do, but I'm only interested in being able to love the world, not to despise it, not to hate it, and me, to be able to look upon it and me and all beings with love and admiration and great respect. This I understand, spoke Govinda, but this very thing was discovered by the Exalted One to be a deception. He commands benevolence, clemency, sympathy, tolerance, but not love. He forbade us to tie our hearts in love to earthly things. I know it, said Siddhartha. His smile shone golden. I know it, Govinda. And behold, with this we are right in the middle of the thicket of opinions, in the dispute about words. For I cannot deny my words of love are in a contradiction, a seeming contradiction with Gautama's words. For this very reason, I distrust in words so much, for I know this contradiction is a deception. I know that I am in agreement with Gautama. How should he not know love, he who has discovered all elements of human existence in their transitoriness, in their meaninglessness, and yet loved people thus much to use a long, laborious life only to help them, to teach them? Even with him, even with your great teacher, I prefer the thing over the words, place more importance on his acts and life than on his speeches, more on the gestures of his hand than his opinions. not in his speech, not in his thoughts. I see his greatness only in his actions, in his life." For a long time the two old men said nothing. Then spoke Govinda while bowing for a farewell. "I thank you, Siddhartha, for telling me some of your thoughts. They are partially strange thoughts. Not all have been instantly understandable to me. This being as it may, I thank you, and I wish you to have calm days." But secretly he thought to himself, "This Siddhartha is a bizarre person. He expresses bizarre thoughts. His teachings sound foolish. So differently sound the exalted ones, pure teachings, clearer, purer, more comprehensible. Nothing strange, foolish, or silly is contained in them. But different from his thoughts seemed to me Siddhartha's hands and feet, his eyes, his forehead, his breath, his smile, his greeting, his walk. Never again, after our exalted Gautama has become one with the nirvana, never since then have I met a person of whom I felt, this is a holy man. Only him, this Siddhartha, have I found to be like this. May his teachings be strange, may his words sound foolish. Out of his gaze and his hand, his skin and his hair, out of every part of him shines a purity, shines a calmness, shines a cheerfulness and mildness and holiness which I have seen in no other person since the final death of our exalted teacher." As Govinda thought like this, and there was a conflict in his heart, he once again bowed to Siddhartha, drawn by love. Deeply he bowed to him who was calmly sitting. "Siddhartha," he spoke, "we have become old men. It is unlikely for one of us to see the other again in this incarnation. I see, beloved, that you have found peace. I confess that I haven't found it. Tell me, O honorable one more word. Give me something on my way which I can grasp, which I can understand. Give me something to be with me on my path. It is often hard, my path, often dark, Siddhartha." Siddhartha said nothing, and looked at him with the ever-unchanged, quiet smile. Govinda stared at his face with fear, with yearning, suffering, and the eternal search was visible in his look, eternal not finding. Siddhartha saw it and smiled. "Bend down to me," he whispered quietly in Govinda's ear. "Bend down to me, like this, even closer, ever closer, very close. Kiss my forehead, Govinda." But while Govinda, with astonishment and yet drawn by great love and expectation, obeyed his words, bent down closely to him and touched his forehead with his lips, something miraculous happened to him. While his thoughts were still dwelling on Siddhartha's wondrous words, while he was still struggling in vain and with reluctance to think away time, to imagine nirvana and samsara as one, while even a certain contempt for the words of his friend was fighting in him against an immense love and veneration, this happened to him. He no longer saw the face of his friend Siddhartha. Instead, he saw other faces, many, a long sequence, a flowing river of faces, of hundreds of thousands, which all came and disappeared. And yet all seemed to be there simultaneously, which all constantly changed and renewed themselves, and which were still all Siddhartha. He saw the face of a fish, a carp with an infinitely painfully opened mouth, the face of a dying fish with fading eyes. He saw the face of a newborn child, red and full of wrinkles, distorted from crying. He saw the face of a murderer. He saw him plunging a knife into the body of another person. He saw in the same second this criminal in bondage, kneeling and his head being chopped off by the executioner with one blow of his sword. He saw the bodies of men and women, naked in positions and cramps of frenzied love. He saw corpses stretched out, motionless, cold, void. He saw the heads of animals, of boars, of crocodiles, of elephants, of bulls, of birds. He saw gods, saw Krishna, saw Agni. He saw all these figures and faces in 1,000 relationships with one another, each one helping the other, loving it, hating it, destroying it, giving rebirth to it. Each one was a will to die, a passionately painful confession of transitoriness, and yet none of them died. Each one only transformed, was always reborn, received evermore a new face, without any time being passed between the one and the other face. And all of these figures and faces rested, flowed, generated themselves, floated along and merged with each other, and they were all constantly covered by something thin, without individuality of its own, but yet existing, like a thin glass or ice, like a transparent skin, a shell or mold or mask of water, and this mask was smiling, and this mask was Siddhartha's smiling face, which he, Govinda, in this very same moment touched with his lips. And Govinda saw it like this smile of the mask, this smile of oneness above the flowing forms, this smile of simultaneousness above the 1,000 births and deaths. This smile of Siddhartha was precisely the same, was precisely of the same kind as the quiet, delicate, impenetrable, perhaps benevolent, perhaps mocking, wise, 1,000-fold smile of Gautama, the Buddha, as he had seen it himself with great respect 100 times. Like this, Govinda knew the perfected ones are smiling. Not knowing any more whether time existed, whether the vision had lasted a second or 100 years, not knowing any more whether there existed a Siddhartha, a Gautama, a me and a you, feeling in his innermost self as if he had been wounded by a divine arrow, the injury of which tasted sweet, being enchanted and dissolved in his innermost self. Govinda still stood for a little while, bent over Siddhartha's quiet face, which he had just kissed, which had just been the scene of all manifestations, all transformations, all existence. The face was unchanged. Under its surface, the depth of the 1,000-foldness had closed up again. He smiled silently, smiled quietly and softly, perhaps very benevolently, perhaps very mockingly, precisely as he used to smile. Precisely as he used to smile, the exalted one. Deeply, Govinda bowed. Tears he knew nothing of ran down his old face. Like a fire burned the feeling of the most intimate love, the humblest veneration in his heart. Deeply he bowed, touching the ground. Before him, who was sitting motionlessly, whose smile reminded him of everything he had ever loved in his life, what had ever been valuable and holy to him in his life. The end. Thank you all so much for joining me for this book, as indeed so many of you join me for all the books we read on Fireside Reading. You can check most of them out at the Fireside Reading YouTube channel, Fireside Reading, or you can look at our website, firesidereading.com. And there you can learn all about the various ways that you can find my Fireside Readings. I thank you so much for your company, and join me day after tomorrow for The Velveteen Rabbit, which I'll read this Thursday and Friday, and then the following week we'll start another book. So no reading tomorrow. All right. I look forward to seeing you all in 2 days. Until I see you, everyone, stay very, very well indeed.